Settling into the soft hush of night, imagine a world where candlelight flickers gently against stone walls, and time moves at the patient pace of drifting clouds. Let your breathing slow as this story begins, not in haste, not in sharp lines, but in a long, smooth river of words meant to carry you quietly toward sleep. This is the tale of Elizabeth, not told as a lesson or a lecture, but as a gentle unfolding of memory, rumor, and possibility, all blended together like the distant sound of a bell that keeps ringing long after has been struck. Elizabeth lived in an age when people believed the world was filled with unseen forces, where the wind itself might carry whispers, and illness could be sent by sorrow as much as by sickness. She was known in her small kingdom for a kind of quiet strength that did not shout or boast. Her voice was soft, but when she spoke, others leaned in, as though drawn by a warm fire on a cold evening. Her eyes held a thoughtful stillness, as if she were always listening to something far away. Those who loved her said she carried too much inside her heart, as though she felt every joy and every grief twice as deeply as anyone else. In the palace where she lived, mornings began with the gentle clatter of servants preparing breakfast and the distant calls of birds beyond tall arched windows. Elizabeth would rise slowly, often pausing by the glass to watch the light stretch across the gardens. Dew sparkled on rose petals, and the air smelled faintly of damp earth and blooming flowers. She would breathe in deeply, as if trying to gather that calm and keep it with her throughout the day. Yet there was always a shadow beneath her peace, something unspoken that followed her like a quiet echo. The people around her noticed small changes long before anything truly terrible occurred. Elizabeth, who once walked briskly through the halls, began to move more slowly, as if the very air had grown heavy. Sometimes she would pause in the middle of a sentence, her gaze drifting to nothing in particular. It was not forgetfulness, not exactly, but more like she was slipping into a private place that no one else could enter. Her ladies-in-waiting would exchange worried glances, but they said nothing, afraid of disturbing her. In those days there were many theories about what might make a person fade. Some believed in invisible poisons that could be slipped into wine or tea. Others spoke of curses whispered by enemies, woven into the fabric of a person's life. Still others thought that grief, when carried too long, could hollow a person from the inside until even breathing felt like a burden. Elizabeth had known grief, that was certain. She had lost her mother at a young age, and later a beloved sister, and each loss left a mark that never quite healed. There were nights when Elizabeth could not sleep, when she would sit by the window long after the palace had grown quiet. The moon would cast pale silver light across the floor as she would trace patterns on the glass with her finger, as if writing messages to someone who was no longer there. Her mind wandered back to memories of laughter, of warm embraces, of voices that had once filled her life and now existed only in echoes. Sometimes she whispered their names, so softly that even the night might not hear. The physicians who attended her tried to help, but in their time, understanding was limited. They spoke of imbalanced humors and weak spirits. They suggested tonics made from bitter herbs and strange roots, and they advised long walks in fresh air. Elizabeth followed their instructions politely, sipping their potions and strolling through the gardens, but nothing truly lifted the weight she carried. If anything, she seemed to grow more tired with each passing day. Some in the court whispered of poison. It was not an uncommon fear in a place where power and jealousy lived side by side. Elizabeth was beloved by many, but that alone could make her a target. If someone wished to see her gone, they might have done so quietly, with a single drop of something colorless and tasteless slipped into her drink. The idea lingered like a dark cloud, though no one could point to any clear evidence. Her cups were tested, her meals examined, yet nothing obvious was ever found. Others believed that Elizabeth's body was simply worn down by years of emotional strain. In those times people did not speak of depression or anxiety as we do now, but they recognized the look of someone who had been carrying too much sorrow for too long. Elizabeth's smile had grown thinner, her laughter rarer. She often seemed distant, as if she were already partway gone, walking in a place between the living and the remembered. Perhaps her heart, heavy with old griefs, had finally grown too tired to keep beating. There were also rumors of a lingering illness. Elizabeth sometimes complained of aches that moved through her body like slow shadows. Some days she felt feverish, other days chilled, even when wrapped in warm blankets. Her appetite faded, and her once bright eyes dulled. In an era before modern medicine, even a small infection could become something far more serious. A simple sickness, left untreated or misunderstood, might have quietly taken root and spread. slowly weakening her until there was nothing left to fight with. The palace itself seemed to sense her fading. The halls felt quieter, the colors dimmer, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Servants spoke in hushed tones, and even the birds in the garden seemed to sing more softly. Elizabeth spent more time in her rooms, resting on a couch near the window, watching the world outside move on without her. Carriages passed, people laughed, life continued, and yet she felt increasingly separate from it all. One afternoon she asked to be taken into the garden. The sun was gentle, the sky a pale blue brushed with thin clouds. She walked slowly among the flowers, touching their petals as if saying goodbye. There was a peacefulness in her expression that both comforted and frightened those who watched her. It was the look of someone who had stopped fighting, who had accepted whatever was coming next. That evening, Elizabeth grew weaker. Her breathing became shallow, her skin cool to the touch. The physicians were called, but they could do little more than offer soothing words and hold her hand. She drifted in and out of sleep, murmuring things that made little sense to anyone else but might have been deeply meaningful to her. Names, fragments of memories, half-formed thoughts slipped from her lips like leaves floating on water. When she finally passed, it was quiet. There was no great cry, no dramatic moment, just a gentle stillness that settled over her. Those in the room felt it like a soft closing of a door. Elizabeth was gone, leaving behind only questions and a deep, aching sadness. In the days that followed, people searched for reasons. They wanted something solid to hold on to, a clear cause that could make sense of their loss. Some clung to the idea of poison, convinced that someone must be blamed. Others spoke of illness, of a body that had simply failed. Many believed, quietly, that it was her sorrow that had taken her, that the weight of all she had endured had finally grown too heavy. Perhaps it was not just one thing. Perhaps Elizabeth's death was the result of many small hurts, many unseen struggles, layered one upon another until her strength was gone. A little grief, a little sickness, a little exhaustion of the soul. Like a candle burning down, she had given light for as long as she could, until there was nothing left but a thin wisp of smoke. As time passed, the sharpness of her absence softened to something more like a gentle ache. Stories were told about her kindness, her quiet wisdom, her soft smile. People remembered the way she listened, the way she seemed to understand things that could not be easily spoken. And in those stories, she lived on not as a mystery to be solved, but as a presence that had touched many lives. Now, as you lie here listening to this tale, let the questions about Elizabeth drift away like clouds dissolving into the night sky. It does not matter, in the end, exactly what caused her death. What matters is the calm that comes from remembering, the peace that comes from letting go. Her story, like all stories, becomes softer and kinder with time, smoothing out the sharp edges of uncertainty. Feel your own breathing slow, steady, and gentle. Imagine the quiet garden where Elizabeth once walked, the soft moonlight on stone, the distant sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. Let those images wrap around you like a warm blanket. The world grows still, and the story fades into a comforting hush, leaving you drifting, safe, and relaxed towards sleep. The hush that followed Elizabeth's passing did not end with the closing of her eyes. It lingered in the palace, in the air itself, as if every corridor and curtain were remembering her. Days moved slowly, like thick honey sliding from a spoon, and even the clocks seemed unsure of how loudly they should tick. People walked more softly, spoke more gently, and often found themselves pausing for no clear reason, feeling that something precious had slipped quietly out of the world. In the early mornings when the sky was still pale, and the sun only just beginning to warm the stone walls, a few of Elizabeth's closest attendants would gather in the small sitting room near her former chambers. They would sit with cups of tea growing cold in their hands, talking about her in low, almost reverent tones. One would remember how Elizabeth used to smile when she heard birdsong. Another how she would stop to speak kindly to even the youngest servant. These memories were like small candles, glowing softly in the shared dimness of grief. Among them was an older woman named Margaret, who had served Elizabeth for many years. Margaret had seen the slow changes, the way Elizabeth's laughter had faded, the way her shoulders had begun to slump as though carrying an invisible burden. Sometimes Margaret wondered if there had been something she could have done, some small act of comfort that might have eased Elizabeth's weariness. The thought stayed with her, gentle but persistent, like a stone in a pocket. As the days turned into weeks, rumors continued to drift through the kingdom like leaves on a breeze. Some said Elizabeth had been cursed by a rival, that dark magic had stolen her strength one breath at a time. Others insisted that a traitor in the court had slipped her a deadly substance. These stories spread easily because people wanted a dramatic reason, something that felt worthy of the loss they had suffered. But there were also those who quietly believed that the truth was far simpler and far sadder. They thought of Elizabeth alone in her room at night, staring out at the moon, her heart heavy with memories. They imagined the ache of missing those she had loved, the strain of always appearing strong when inside she felt fragile. In their minds, it was not a single sharp blow that had taken her, but a long, slow wearing down, like waves smoothing a stone until nothing rough remained. The garden Elizabeth had loved so much continued to bloom. Roses opened their petals, and soft green leaves caught the sunlight. Sometimes Margaret would walk there alone, listening to the bees and the rustle of branches. She liked to think that in some quiet way Elizabeth was still present there, in the gentle movement of air and the warmth of the sun on her skin. It was a comforting thought, one that brought a sense of peace rather than sorrow. At night the palace felt especially still. Without Elizabeth's soft footsteps and quiet voice, the halls seemed larger, emptier. Yet there was also a kind of calm, as if her spirit had left behind a soothing hush. Those who slept there dreamed more deeply, and some even said they dreamed of Elizabeth, smiling and serene, no longer burdened by whatever had weighed on her in life. Time, as it always does, kept moving forward. New conversations filled the rooms, new laughter echoed where hers once had, but Elizabeth was not forgotten. She became part of the gentle history of the place, a name spoken with fondness and a touch of mystery. No one ever truly knew what had caused her death, and perhaps that was all right. Not every story needs a single clear answer. Now, as the night grows deeper around you, let these lingering images fade into softness. The garden, the quiet palace, the gentle memory of a woman who lived and was loved. Breathe slowly, feeling your body relax, as if you too are being carried by a calm, steady current. The questions, the rumors, the old worries can all drift away, leaving only a sense of rest. In this quiet space where stories blend into dreams, Elizabeth's tale becomes something warm and distant, like a lullaby heard from far away. Let it carry you gently and peacefully into sleep, where everything is simple, safe, and softly lit by the glow of calm. The calm that settled over the palace after Elizabeth's passing was not empty. It was full of small, gentle moments that seemed to breathe in and out with the people who remained. Even those who had not known her well felt a strange softness in their hearts, as if something kind had brushed against them and left a quiet warmth behind. In the long evenings, when lamps were lit and shadows danced on the walls, stories about Elizabeth drifted through the rooms like a comforting mist. Some spoke of her as a young woman, full of curiosity, walking through the market streets in simple clothes just to hear ordinary people talk and laugh. She had loved to listen, to really listen, as though every voice carried a little piece of truth. Others remembered how she would sit with children, telling them gentle tales and brushing their hair with slow, soothing strokes. These memories painted a picture of a soul that was deeply tender, perhaps too tender for a world that could be sharp and demanding. There were moments when Margaret felt as though Elizabeth was still near. A sudden breeze in a closed room, the faint scent of roses where there were none, a feeling of being watched with quiet affection. She did not fear these sensations. They felt kind, like a soft hand resting on her shoulder. In her heart, she believed that Elizabeth had simply stepped into another form of being, one that was lighter and free of pain. The physicians who had once tried so earnestly to keep Elizabeth alive eventually stopped speaking of her case. They returned to their books and their remedies, treating new patients, yet a part of them always remembered the gentle woman they could not save. Sometimes when faced with someone who seemed worn down by sadness rather than sickness, they would think of Elizabeth, and try in their own limited way to offer not just medicine but kindness. The people of the kingdom built small traditions in her memory without even realizing it. A bench was placed in the garden where she had liked to sit, and flowers were planted around it. Visitors would pause there, often without knowing why, feeling a sense of peace wash over them. It became a place of quiet reflection, a little pocket of calm in a busy world. As seasons passed, Elizabeth's story softened even more. The sharp edges of mystery faded, leaving behind a gentle outline of a life that had been lived with grace. Whether it was illness, sorrow, or something unseen that had taken her, it no longer seemed so important. What mattered was the love she had given and the way it continued to ripple outward. touching people in small, almost invisible ways.